We're speaking with commentator Gill Troy, who's recently written a Jerusalem Post op-ed called "Israelis Must Remain United in the Face of Terrorism." Gill, you wanted to put your finger right on the question of who's to blame for the long onslaught of terror attacks in Israel. Who is to blame?
We always like to create narratives, but we have to be very, very clear. Israeli actions aren't the cause of terrorism. Terrorists are the cause of terrorism. And we need that moral clarity. And we sometimes try to give some kind of excuse for, oh, they're reacting to this, they're reacting to that. To kill a human being, to ram two children who are sitting there standing with their father waiting for a bus, to kill a woman and her two daughters at close range requires years of manipulation and of delegitimization and of hatred. It doesn't come just because Israel did this or that. They hate Israel because of what Israel is, not because of what Israel does.
Well, yeah, I was going to say some in Israel suggest, some inside Israel, and many outside suggest that Israelis are to blame. And what do you say to that accusation?
I call these people the blame Israel firsters, that they don't see how deep the hatred goes. They don't see how often Israel has tried to make peace. And they also don't see how evil terrorism is. We know this. We know this as Americans. We know this as Westerners. We know this as many of us have been victimized by terrorism. And if we don't have moral clarity, by implying that somehow there's a justification, we help feed the terrorism and we justify the terrorism, and it's unacceptable.
Terrorists recently gunned down, you mentioned this, a mother and her two daughters, the British-Israeli D family. Tell us how anti-Zionists are actually blaming the mom and daughters for their own murders.
The D family was going on vacation in a two-car convoy because they were a family of 7. And they were ambushed by a crazed Palestinian terrorist, hopped up on who knows what, on hatred. And they're saying, oh, well, they're settlers because they live past the Green Line. Now, the Green Line was an improvised border from the 1949 Armistice Agreement. That terrorist didn't know where those people lived. And wherever they lived, they were innocents who were on their way to vacation. To somehow have these tweets, to somehow have these justifications by intellectuals saying, oh, well, they're combatants, is really to blur the morality and, in a sense, to kind of justify terrorism in the most awful way.
How did Rabbi Leo D. answer these charges that his wife and his two daughters were complicit in their own murders?
On the worst day of his life, this rabbi stood up and first of all, had a clear line about moral clarity. He said, we cannot live in a world of relativism. We cannot live in a world where we can't distinguish between good and bad. We can't live in a world where we blame the victim. But then he said something really powerful. He said, what's true faith? Faith is not just counting what you've lost, but appreciating what you have. And he said, I used to have a family of 7, now I have a family of 4. And we know that Israel's been a little divided lately. We've had our political challenges. But that man and his beautiful remaining children and the pain that we all felt united us. And he showed that there's a way forward, even on the worst day of his life.
Do you see in how he reacted to these terrorists important clues to how Israelis have survived, even thrived, despite 75 years of horrifying assaults on them and on their nation?
Israel has never known a formal day of peace. But Israel has also never known a day where it didn't have a democracy. Quite unique. And yes, we are, I call this the jujitsu, J-E-W, take the negative and turn it into a positive. Don't let them define us. Don't let them freeze us in our most painful moment. Don't let them freeze us in the worst day of our lives. But pull out of that and make sure to have the best day of our lives. And it was very, very powerful because the murder of his wife and 2 daughters occurred during the festival of Passover. And the rabbi had to do what they call the hardest mitzvah, the hardest commandment. Still celebrate the holiday, and then mourn. And that dance between mourning and celebration is what we're all going to experience during Memorial Day in Israel, which is a very serious day. It's not a day for sales, it's a day for mourning. And then at a moment's instant, there's going to be a siren, we'll stand at attention, we'll put mourning aside, and we'll celebrate the 75th anniversary of the State of Israel.
Well, thank you so much, Gill Troy, author of the recent Jerusalem Post commentary, Israelis Must Remain United in the Face of Terrorism. I'm Paul Strand, CBN News, Jerusalem.